And something that's different about this headstone is it doesn't have his name on it, only the date. No name, just the date. I'm here in Sonora, Texas. Not Sonora, Mexico, but Sonora, Texas. And I'm at what they call the Old Sonora Ice House Ranch Museum. And I understand they have a collection in here and a display about Will Carver, who was one of the Wild Bunch and is featured in the picture that they call today the Fort Worth Five. Everybody knows what that is, so I'm not going to go into that, but let's go in here and see if she's here yet. I might be a little bit early. Oh, there she is. She's here. Hello, you Elaine?
Yes, I am.
I'm Eddie Lanham. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. I understand you have a collection here of Will Carver artifacts and pictures and other things that I'm just like for you to show it to us.
This is our display.
Oh, okay.
Carver. We have the gun that shot him. This picture here. This picture was taken in Fort Worth.
All right, tell me the story of that.
And the photographer put it in his front window. And a Pinkerton agent, that's an agent for the railroad, spotted it and wanted to know who they were. Well, the photographer wouldn't tell him. And so the agent got copies of it and spread it around this part of Texas. And they figured out that this is the Sundance Kid, Butch Cassidy, Ben Kilpatrick. He was also known as the Tall Texan, Kid Curry, and this is Will Carver. And we have a blow up here of the picture. They were dressed up because Carver was getting married.
Oh, that's why they were so dressed up.
Yes,
okay.
And some of the other gang members said, y'all look so good, you need to get your picture made, which was the undoing of all of them. You can see his wife-to-be's ring right there on his finger. You can't see it in that picture.
How about that?
But on April 2nd, 1901, these three, plus his brother George, came to Sonora with intentions of robbing the First National Bank. And so these waited at the edge of town, just kind of like in the movies, and then Will and his brother George came on into town. They didn't want to look too obvious, so they were going into some of the businesses, and they did go into a bakery to get some grain for their horses, and that's when the bartender at the Maldeath Saloon spotted them. His name was Boozy Sharp.
Boozy?
Boozy. It's a good name for a bartender.
It is.
So he went and got the deputy and the sheriff. That's their pictures there. They went over to the bakery to talk to them, but as they were stepping into the door, they thought the outlaws were going for their guns, and so they had the big shootout. These two left when they heard the gunshots, and Will and George were wounded. They took them up to the old jail, which served as a hospital back then, and Carver died of his wounds, and he's buried out here at our cemetery. And for many years, they didn't put a marker on the grave, because back then, if you were a well-known outlaw and people knew where you were buried, they would dig your bones up and sell them for souvenirs. So it was many years before they put a marker, and it's just a tiny little marble marker that has just the date on it. April 2nd, 1901. So if you don't know who that is, it doesn't mean anything to you.
No, not a thing.
This is the gun.
Oh my, that's the gun that killed...
Colt 45 that belonged to Davis, that fired the fatal shot.
Now, how did you acquire the gun?
We got it from the Davis family. The Davises were one of our pioneer founding families that helped settle this area.
They still around?
There's one. There's one left.
So how long have you had this?
Oh gosh, we've been open here since 2008. I'm not real sure when we got it. I would have to check the paperwork.
Sometime in there, but the family had the gun.
Sometime around that time.
The family kept that gun the whole time.
Yes.
So it was Davis that killed him, the deputy, not Bryant?
Well, we've heard both stories. Some people say that Bryant killed him, but I found an article that Bryant wrote where he had been wounded in his gun hand about 2 weeks before that, and he said it was all he could do to even hold a gun, much less kill somebody. So he said, no, I did not kill him, J.L. Davis did.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that pretty much sums it up.
Pretty
doesn't it?
much.
Yeah. Because you know he would want to claim it if he could.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's quite a story. I mean, that gun, you got any idea how much that gun is worth?
We have an idea.
You don't have to tell me. I think I know.
We have an idea, and we have it insured.
I bet you do, man. And it's behind bulletproof glass?
Yes, and then it's in a big steel box inside.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. If you open this, there's another glass inside of there.
Yeah, you can't get into it from here.
No.
No. Have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't blame you one bit. That's quite a artifact that you have there. That's not a relic, that's an artifact.
That's an artifact.
Yeah. Well, I sure appreciate. Oh, and I want to ask you something else. The bank that they were casing was up at the end of Main Street.
It was
but
on the
it's gone?
top end of Main Street as you're heading up to the courthouse. It was on the right-hand side.
Okay.
The Devil's River News is now in that building.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that the same building?
same building.
Oh, it is the same
It's
building.
the same building.
Okay. One more thing. What about the? Were they going to rob the safe in the bank? Is it? You have it here?
Yes, we have it back here.
Oh.
This is the first safe that the First National Bank had when they opened in 1900. So in 1901, this is the one that Carver would have tried to get into.
That looks quite heavy.
The guys that moved it over here said it has to weigh anywhere from 23 to 2,500 pounds because they tried to bring it over here with a front end loader and the bucket went to the ground and the back wheels came off the ground. So they had to get a forklift to get it over here.
That is something. So how do you get in it?
Okay.
I mean, I see it's got a combination
If
lock.
we had the combination, you would do this to release this one, and then it's a kind of a corkscrew getting into it.
Oh, I see. Look at that. What's that?
It has the 3 time clocks. You set those at the time you want it to open the next morning, and it's not going to open until they run down.
So they would have had to have robbed the bank while the bank was open.
Yes.
If
they wanted to get into it,
make
yes.
sure. I didn't realize they had timers on them back then.
I didn't realize they did either, way back there.
And then there's another
A smaller safe.
smaller
in
safe
here.
inside there.
And when I first started at the bank, the president of the bank told me that this section was for the paper currency, which they didn't have that much paper currency back then. So they didn't need a whole big old safe. The rest of the safe was for the loan work on all the ranches.
Oh.
So in case there was a fire, it wouldn't burn up.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Well, I really appreciate this. This has been a learning experience for me, and you did a great job on telling the story of Will.
Well, I'm
And
glad y'all came by.
Thank you so much.
Get a little information
Yes,
out there
ma'am.
on us.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to put you up on YouTube. On our Wild West History Association has a YouTube channel,
Okay,
and we'll put this up probably in a couple of months
great.
after I edit it, and I got some other ones that are coming up. We do like 4 a month, so it'll be on there, and I'll notify you when it's up.
Yeah.
After going to the Sonora Museum there in town, learn all about Will Carver, I'm out here in the cemetery now trying to locate his grave. They said they gave me the section and the grave number and so on and so forth, but there's nothing that marks the sections. So like hunting for. Anyway, I'm down here where I think it might be, so let me look around for just a minute. And I know it's got a round top, and here it is right here. It's got a round top, and something that's different about this headstone is it doesn't have his name on it, only the date. No name, just the date. which was provided by his, I think it was his sister that bought this, or his brother or somebody. But anyway, this is it right here. Will Carver. April the 2nd, 1901 is when he was killed. So if you ever come over here and want to see it, I will post the coordinates when we do a video. That's it.
Hello, it's Mike Bell here for the Wild West History Association. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the famous outlaws who appear in the Fort Worth 5 photograph, taken in about November 1900. The man I'm going to talk about is William Richard Carver, the man standing at the rear left in the photograph. Sometime in November 1900, the famous photograph was taken of the outlaws at John Schwartz's gallery on Main Street, Fort Worth. Carver married Callie in Tarrant County on the 1st of December 1900, and he, Callie, Logan and Annie travelled through the Midwest. The two outlaws abandoned or left the two girls in hotels with plenty of money while they went north to recover loot from earlier robberies, which suggests that they were part of the gang that hit the Winnemucca Bank. When Carver got back, however, it was clear that his relationship with Callie was also short-lived. He sent her back to her family in Palestine, Texas, with $167 in gold. From there, the gang split. Cassidy and Sundance went east and went to South America. Carver, Kilpatrick, and Kid Curry went to Eden to join the rest of the Kilpatrick brothers. Carver and Harvey Logan travelled through the country in a rubber-tired buggy that they'd hired, posing as horse buyers. By mid-February 1901, they were camped near the old Sixes Ranch again, just outside Sonora. They may have been casing the bank, we will never know for certain, but their actions later suggest that might have been the case. They went into Sonora and exchanged a couple of $20 gold coins for smaller currency, which attracted attention to them. What also attracted attention to them was the fact that they stole a quarter of beef from the Sixes Ranch to feed themselves. Both of these events attracted the attention of the local authorities. By mid-March 1901, they were back at Ben Kilpatrick's family ranch just outside Eden, Texas. On the 27th of March 1901, Will Carver, Ben Kilpatrick, Harvey Logan, George Kilpatrick and others were at the ranch playing croquet. The croquet match proved to be bad timing. Their neighbour, Oliver Thornton, arrived clutching a .22 caliber rifle to air his grievance about the Kilpatrick hogs running wild on his land. Exactly what happened next can never be known for certain. What is certain is that by the end of the day, Thornton had been shot dead and the outlaws had fled. Ben Kilpatrick's brother Ed finally reported that he'd found a body on the Kilpatrick ranch, but only once the perpetrators had long since gone. Sheriff Howes circulated the description of the outlaws around Texas. In Sonora, Sheriff Elijah S. Lige Bryant, a drugstore owner and justice of the peace, recognized the descriptions of the men who'd been at the bank earlier exchanging the currency and who'd stolen the quarter of beef. So he was on the lookout for them. On the 1st of April 1901, Will Carver, Kid Curry, Ben Kilpatrick and Ben's brother George arrived at their old camp outside Sonora. About 8 o'clock in the evening of the 2nd of April, the four men rode up Devil's Draw to the west of the town. Harvey Logan and Ben Kilpatrick waited about a block away, while Will Carver and George Kilpatrick went shopping. They rode round the town, starting at Victor Castillo's store on Plum Street, where they bought some dry goods. They said they were looking for grain and Castillo couldn't help them out, so they went to other stores. As they rode around town, however, they were spotted by Boozy Sharp, a bartender. Boozy, appropriately named, ran to tell his brother Henry, who was one of Lige Bryant's deputy sheriffs, that he'd seen the men who he thought were wanted. Meanwhile, Carver and George continued looking for their grain. They stopped outside the Sonora bakery on Concho Street, which had recently been taken over by Captain Jack Owens. Will and George went into the bakery. Meanwhile, Sheriff Bryant had been alerted, and he and his deputies, J.L. Davis, Henry Sharp, and Constable W.D. Thomason, walked down the back alley from Bryant's drugstore to where it joined Concho Street. The bakery was immediately on their right. Bryant, who was recovering from a gunshot wound that had been inflicted when he'd arrested a burglar not that long ago, was not going to take any chances. He and his men walked into the bakery with their guns drawn and told the two men who had their hands full of parcels to throw up their hands. Again, exactly what happened next is open to some speculation. It appears that George Kilpatrick jumped in surprise, and that prompted the lawmen to open fire. Carver, by all accounts, tried to outdraw the lawmen who were already carrying unholstered weapons. Both men were shot down, hit several times. The two men were taken to the jail that sits next to the courthouse. Will was the most badly wounded. He was delirious and kept calling out, "Die game, boys!" When asked who he was, he said he was one of the off boys, but he finally admitted to being Will Carver. He died just before midnight. Confirmation of his identity came from many people who'd worked with him at the Sixes or knew him from his time in Sutton County. Photographs were taken of the dead bandit, and he was buried in the cemetery on the 4th of April, 1901. It said his sister Frances paid for his headstone. Meanwhile, Harvey Logan and Ben Kilpatrick had seen and heard the shooting. They weren't prepared to get involved, however. They fled north, but their time would come. Bill Carver was certainly one of the more experienced outlaws who appeared in the Fort Worth 5 photograph. By the time he hooked up briefly with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, he had far more experience than they did of train robbery. But his experience had nothing to do with his demise. That was down to bad luck and bad judgment. He ran with the wrong people, and he stayed in an area where he was well known after the Thornton shooting. He could have done what Butch and Sundance did and left not only the area, but the country. And there's one final thing to say about Will Carver. He was never known as News Carver. That name was invented by the makers of the famous 1969 film, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There is absolutely no evidence that Will Carver was ever known as anything other than Will or Bill Carver during his lifetime.